Sitting at my desk, I began to ponder on the 30 years since Maggie and I were married. I'm reminiscing about our honeymoon and all the amazing moments in my life. Remembering my time in Hawaii with Maggie makes me nostalgic and grateful. It was simply great. A wonderful chapter that I will always treasure. From the start, it felt like we had entered a mystical universe, leaving behind the daily hustle and bustle and finding an unfathomable tranquility. Walking down Waikiki Beach, sand between our toes and the sound of the surf. Secrets are whispered. We were surrounded by splendor. The air was filled with the pleasant aroma of blooming flowers, a constant reminder of the love and tranquility that surrounded us. But it wasn't just the breathtaking scenery that made our honeymoon unforgettable. It was the times that we shared, exploring lush woods and discovering secret waterfalls. Felt like finding Mother Nature's gifts. We stood together, awestruck by the beauty and strength that surrounded us. Our cliffside retreat in Maui was beautiful, with vistas that seemed to go on forever. Every sunset filled the sky with vivid colors, and they held each other close. We was overwhelmed by affection and dedication. Evenings were like a beautiful melody, with candlelit meals on the beach beneath a starry sky, accompanied by delicious seafood and local specialties. What made it magical was Maggie's eyes and the way her love shone. Hawaii was more than just a destination for us. It became the center of our love story, filled with memories and dreams we shared. Looking back on our honeymoon, I am reminded of the beauty and depth of our relationship, which reignited our love, strengthened our bond, and provided us with moments of pure bliss and calm. 30 years later, I cherish these memories of our time in that lover's paradise. When my secretary walked in, I was staring out the window deep in concentration. "Jason, what has made you so joyful lately?" "Won the lottery," she laughed. I realized I'd been smiling and content for the past 2 weeks. I mentioned that my wife had been exceptionally affectionate and attentive, making me feel appreciated and cherished again after many years. It felt like a second honeymoon, and I couldn't wait to spend more time with her. Acting like an adolescent in love, I didn't want the happiness to end. Maggie and I have a strong marriage, but after 30 years, the excitement can fade into routine. Maggie, on the other hand, had been extraordinarily loving, desiring intimacy virtually every night, and rekindling areas of our relationship that had been neglected for years. I never imagined her feelings were for anything more than rekindling our marriage. I arranged a surprise romantic evening and left work early with a smile. I received 24 roses, her favorite wine and chocolate-covered cherries. Tonight, I'll surprise her with a 7-night cruise to celebrate our enduring love. I entered the house through the garage and headed up the kitchen steps. Instead of seeing my wife, Maggie, our 29-year-old daughter, Brandy, sat at the table. I smiled, kissed her forehead and said, "Hey, baby, where is your mother?" 2 weeks ago, Brandy spoke with her mother. "Mom, I'm unsure about this. I adore my father and I'm frightened that if I go along with it, I'll damage him." "Brandy, Dad loves you and will understand. You've stated that you need something greater than what you've had before. Dad isn't growing any younger. I'm confident he'll understand your requirements and allow you to have this one-time pleasure." "Mom, I can't face Dad and tell him I'm going on a date with another man. I simply can't do it." "Then allow me to do it. Alexander will be waiting for you at the restaurant at 7 p.m. and you will be ready to go by 6. When Dad gets home, I'll explain everything to him. And you'll receive the experience you want. Honey, I consented to this date. But I have reservations. This feels wrong and I should not leave. How will I be able to look your father in the eyes? For the next 2 weeks now that I've accepted. To go on a date with another man? So I propose you don't tell him anything. Show him how much you adore him during these 2 weeks. Let him know he doesn't need to worry. And once I explain everything, he will understand. It is not about love. Simply new friendships and a little fun. Reach out to him, rock his world. And when I explain the circumstances that evening, he will gladly welcome you back. Dad adores you and is willing to do anything for you. He always provided you exactly what you desired. Is he showing his affection for you? Probably, yes. Maybe you are right. It's only one date. And this does not imply that I am abandoning your father for another man. A fun night out 30 years later should be no problem. Every night until date night. I will show your dad how amazing he is. And how much I adore him. And when I go back, I'll attempt to make him the happiest man on the planet. Mom, please make him feel loved and appreciated. He is a terrific person that will provide you with an unforgettable encounter. Now I need to get home and prepare dinner for Mike. Thank you, baby, and say hello to Mike. When will you to give us grandchildren? Soon, we've already discussed it. And hope to begin working on it in a few months. Brandy remarked before leaving. Maggie found herself alone in the art studio Jason had built for her behind their house, contemplating his latest project. She has recently struggled with creativity, tormented by thoughts of being with another man. However, Brandy's counsel resonated in her head, and her brushes began to dance on the canvas, bringing brilliant colors and evocative landscapes to life. Maggie sat alone, confident that she was doing everything correctly, allowing calm to wash over her guilty feelings. Jason may be upset at first, but I believe I can show him how much I adore him, and how wonderful he has been as a husband and parent. I will be the best wife and show my love for him. Maggie dressed in his favorite baby doll nightgown. After taking a shower, groomed her hair and applied makeup, and greeted Jason as he got home. Maggie dressed in a nightgown and heels, led him to the bedroom and undressed him, startling him with a long overdue display of enthusiasm. She satisfied him behind the belt. His smile made her feel warm and happy, making her question why she hadn't done it sooner. Jason, this was the finest. Welcome return after a long absence. What is the occasion, honey? I simply wanted to express how amazing you are. And how much I love you. Did you enjoy it? I did. It has been so long that I have forgotten how much I miss it. I felt happy as I drew him onto the bed. And we exchanged passionate kisses for several minutes. It was the most fulfilling intimacy they'd had in years, prompting Maggie to reevaluate her rendezvous with Alexander in the coming weeks. Their intimacy reached new heights. And Jason became a happier man, smiling, joking, and exhibiting affection as usual. Maggie felt pleased than she had in a long time. And she began to reconsider her date night plans. She even talked about the favorable improvements with Brandy, wondering if she still wanted the scheduled experience. Mom, this is amazing, but don't cancel just yet. Let's see what happens in the next 2 weeks. I simply enjoy each other and see where it leads. There's no reason to cancel just yet. We will review in 2 weeks. And you can always cancel at the last minute. I am confident Alexander will understand. Remember that this opportunity may not come again. All right, maybe you are right. Remind me of Alexander's position. I understand he's your friend's father. But tell me more about him. Sure thing, Mom. When his wife Mary was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, he took time off work to be by her side until she died. She was the love of his life. And when she died, he was lost. He got depressed and avoided everything but work. When Mary and I advised he began dating, he admitted he didn't know how to interact with anyone else. Listening to him brought me to tears. And I realized I might have a solution for both of you. Brandy went on to tell her mother about Alexander's strong admiration for her and his desire for intimacy. She detailed the conversation and Alexander's enthusiasm to meet Maggie. So, Mom, he thinks you're gorgeous and wants to spend time with you. I'll give him your phone number and you two can plan a date. He is roughly 10 years younger than you. And I am confident you will get along well. He simply needs someone to connect with and befriend. And I believe you can help one another. The next day, Alexander contacted Maggie. And after a lovely talk, he invited her to be his companion and spend the night with him. When he complimented her beauty in the photo and remarked how great it would be for her to go on a date with him, she felt like a schoolgirl. The pleasure of doing something unusual, combined with his flirtation, gave her butterflies in her tummy. She consented to the date and said she was looking forward to meeting him. He offered to pick her up, but she preferred to meet him at the restaurant. They texted one another on a daily basis and flirted more as the evening of their date approached. Maggie's text messages would not have passed the most basic test of a wife's fidelity. She was continuously thrilled, imagining what she had to accomplish. She tried not to forget Jason. And each evening she poured more and more energy into their lovemaking. Jason now walks about with a grin on his face, while Maggie walks around with an insatiable urge for sex. This was a new level that she appreciated, beyond her wildest expectations. I adored my kid, and thought she was the most beautiful girl in the world. I was so pleased of how she had grown into the woman she is today. I wish I had spent more time with her as she grew older. But I worked hard to provide a decent life for them, and tried to be there for her whenever possible. I smiled when I saw her, but I felt embarrassed. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? And where's your mother? I asked. She watched as I arranged 24 roses, a bottle of wine, and a box of chocolates. I have a great surprise for your mom tonight. And I can't wait to see her. I dug inside my jacket pocket and pulled out travel arrangements and tickets for a 7-day voyage on the new yacht Love. I'm whisking your mother away on a 7-day cruise. And I can't wait to watch her reaction when she finds out. Don't say anything when she comes home. I want to surprise her. Dad spoke. Hearing her call me Daddy always made me smile, as it reminded me of her as a tiny child sitting on my knee. But something felt odd. Tears welled up in her eyes. And she was out of breath, clearly concerned about what she had to tell me. Dad, we need to talk, she whispered, a tear running down her cheek. Concern washed over my face. What is wrong? Is something wrong with Mom? No, Mom is okay. Please sit down and allow me to explain, I responded. After a break, she said again. Dad, you know how much Mom adores you. And she told me how wonderful things have been between you two recently. Yes, I also love her. That is why I want to express how much she means to me. Seeing her emotions, I concluded her news was not what she had expected. I sincerely apologize, Daddy, but Mom went on a date. I sat in startled silence, unable to digest her remarks. Her tears streamed as rage flared within me. Brandy, what are you saying? Where's your mother? I demanded, my voice so loudly that she recoiled in horror. Mom loves you very much, Daddy. And I hope you do not take this the wrong way. But Mom departed on a date with another man. And won't return till tomorrow. She couldn't tell you herself. So I offered to break it to you since she didn't want to hurt you. It's only one night, she'll be back tomorrow. Is this some sort of joke? I cannot believe this. Your mother would never betray me like this. We were incredibly close and affectionate. This can't be real. She loves you, Dad. She simply needed something more in life. At least once, after 30 years of marriage. Nothing is changing between you two. Except she might love you even more for being understanding. I stared at my daughter. Brandy, why are you participating in this? Your mother should not have pulled you into this. And I should be speaking to her, not you. How did she get you into all of this? Dad, Mom, and I have always been close. And we share everything. She stated that activities between you two had slowed down in the bedroom. And she no longer felt desired. My friend's father lost his wife a few years ago. And wanted companionship, so I sort of introduced them. I rose up hastily and knocked over my chair. Are you really serious? You set up your mother on a date with another man? Is this what you were telling me? She lowered her head and stared at the floor. She remained mute. Meanwhile, I paced back and forth in the kitchen, attempting to understand the situation. Damn you, Brandy. Please answer me. I yelled, rising above her. Have you set this up? Is my wife, your mother, on a date with your friend's father? Because of you? My violent outburst caused saliva to flow out of my mouth. I'm truly sorry, Daddy, but while it seems horrible, when you phrase it like way, I did it out of love for my friend's parents. Holy hell, what did you do? Love for your friend's parents. How about your affection for me? Are you just ignoring me and expecting me to accept anything you come up with? Where is she now? And why did you say she won't return until tomorrow? Dad, they went to a restaurant. I do not know which one. And then they'll spend the night together just once. She will be back tomorrow. And Daddy? She just loves you. She has been telling me for the past 2 weeks how much she loves you and does not want you to be upset. It's only one date a night. She hoped you'd understand and give her this one chance. So is this it? I assumed her newfound fondness of the last 2 weeks was genuine. But now you're saying that was merely her way of releasing guilt. I can promise you that this will not end well. Still in tears, she begged. Dad, it is not like that at all. She never feigned or harmed you. On the contrary, she went to great lengths to demonstrate her love for you. Daddy, can't you give her just one night? You know she adores you and cannot picture life without you. She remarked that she was looking forward to your retirement and spending time with your grandchildren. Mike and I intend to have children and we need both of you. Isn't that ironic? That ship sailed when she consented to go on a date with someone other than me. Who is this guy? He's my friend Mary's father and he's quite nice. You will like him, Daddy. I believe you have a lot in common. Sure. We could be best friends. So do you believe I could befriend a man who intentionally dates a married woman, my wife? Maybe we can be drinking buddies and I'll let him borrow your mom on weekends. Is this your plan for me? Brandy collapsed into her chair, recognizing she had made a big mistake in her strategy. My fury, conveyed in terms she never wanted to hear, rocked her to the core, sending shivers down her spine as she cowered after pacing the room. I regained control, turning to my daughter with hatred in my voice. My pain and agony were obvious, making her feel small and accountable for her role in the situation. Listen closely, Brandy. Leave now. I need time alone to process what you two did to me tonight. I do not want to see or hear from you. No calls, no messages ever. Your treason is unforgivable. You're dead to me, understand? I am no longer your father and you're no longer my daughter. Get out of my house and do not talk to me again, Brandy cried openly, her head in her hands. Dad, please do not say that. I love you and I'd like to stay here tonight. Mom and I plan for me to stay with you. We do not want you to be alone. The disrespect you've displayed has me wondering if you've ever truly appreciated or loved me as your father. You are your mother's daughter. I've worked tirelessly for years to provide for you both. And this is the gratitude I receive. It turns out I am merely a meal ticket. Neither of you has ever shown me respect. She pleaded, I love you through tears and sobbing. Please reconsider, allow Mom to explain everything tomorrow. You've spent 30 lovely years together and I know you adore her. Give her this one thing and she will not abandon you, Daddy. She loves you. She can have whatever she wants but she will never have me back. Forgiveness is beyond me. Everyone will face consequences including the man who kidnapped my wife. Now go. You have displayed your true colors. You still have a mother. Nothing changes for you either, Brandy. You are no longer my daughter. Leave with tears streaming down her cheeks. She fled the house in anguish. She had never experienced pain like this before. She never expected her father's reaction to be so severe if he truly disowned her. For the first time she realized she may have crossed a line by assisting her mother with this scheme. She knew he loved them both but his rage was evident and she prayed for his forgiveness. I called Maggie's cell phone immediately after Brandy left but it went straight to voicemail. I left her several messages pleading with her to call back and come home. When my calls were unanswered, even after several drinks I texted her the same plea, still no response. By 2 a.m. I realized she wasn't returning my calls or answering them. Exhausted from self-pity, I stared blankly at the TV which was broadcasting more bleak news. My world is transforming into a nightmare and I'm instantly reflecting on our 30-year marriage. Brandy's milestones, once frequent intimacy, have been replaced by routine. I felt a sense of loss. Our sex life had become predictable but there were no complaints. And after coitus we always embraced drifting off into each other's arms. We exchanged daily. The phrase I love you is rarely argued, however it appeared that those words held little significance. Looking out at Maggie's art studio which I built for her as a sanctuary where she could express her creativity for 2 decades. I realized it was more important than I thought. Despite being proud of her accomplishments I felt relegated to the sidelines. But her happiness was most important to me. The conversation with Brandy struck me like a ton of bricks. I was surprised to learn she wanted to be with another man. There is no warning at all. Despite years of hard work to support my family, I didn't realize she wasn't happy with our marriage. It hurt to know she shared this with Brandy instead of talking to me. Fueling my rage and humiliation. Reflecting on my life, home and future. I remembered the house and property I inherited from my grandfather in my name prior to our marriage. No mortgage made me think, fueled by alcohol and rage. I planned ways to harm Maggie in the same way that she had hurt me. Looking out at her studio I felt a surge of strength wash over me. Possibly from the alcohol or the pain of betrayal, with renewed vigor. I sprung into action. I made numerous trips to our bedroom to gather all of her belongings and move them to the studio. Shoes, clothing and jewelry were piled in the center. I then gathered photo albums including our wedding photos and stacked them atop the heap. Recalling items in the attic. I retrieved her wedding dress, baby clothes and other items adding to the growing pile. It amazed me how much she had accumulated over the years. I removed her pictures from the walls and piled them alongside sculptures, sketches and all of her prized possessions. Now, a part of the ever-growing heap. It was already 5 a.m. and I felt nervous. I chose to wait until 6 a.m. Before taking action, I gave her the opportunity to return or respond to my calls and messages. If I didn't hear back or she wasn't home, would go ahead with my plan. I double-checked the house to make sure everything important to her was in the studio. At 5:30 p.m., I went to the garage and got a 20-liter gasoline can. Heading to the studio to prepare for 6 a.m. In the meantime, I went online, canceled our joint credit cards, transferred money to our accounts, drew cash from the safe, and packed a few suitcases to load into my truck. I intended to stay away until the lawyer sorted things out, giving her another 5 minutes to return at 605, as my last hope faded. I poured gasoline on the pile in the studio walls. After a deep sigh and a brief hesitation, I struck a match, igniting her belongings. The fire spread quickly, becoming visible from the street before I could flee. Her world burned quickly. Driving down the highway, a profound realization struck me. My distress has exacerbated the situation. Tears flowed from my eyes as I was overcome with sorrow. It dawned on me that my once happy marriage had suffered the same fate as the studio, which had been consumed by fire. Unexpectedly, the fire spread to the back porch, endangering the home. Fortunately, firefighters were able to contain the fire, saving the house from total destruction. However, it suffered significant smoke damage, and needed to be repaired before it could be reoccupied. Meanwhile, I stayed at a highway motel 90 miles away from the charred remains of my marriage. Paying in cash to avoid detection is exhausting and overwhelming. I turned off my phone and collapsed into bed, falling into a deep sleep until noon. Upon waking, I discovered dozens of missed calls and texts from Brandy Maggie in the sheriff. After exiting the Uber, I met Alexander at the restaurant. Feeling both nervous and excited to see the handsome young man waiting for me at the reception desk. He smiled upon seeing me, appreciating my little black dress, black sheer tights and matching high heels. His gaze lingered on my exposed cleavage, accentuated by my black bra. Earlier in the day, I had spent several hours at the salon to ensure my hair and makeup were perfect. I wanted this one occasion to be thrilling, unforgettable and flawless for him. My companion seemed pleased with what he saw. And the way he adjusted his growing manhood underscored his reaction. Feeling more confident as I realized he liked what he saw, I greeted him with a tender kiss. We started at the bar, sitting on bar stools, and when I stood up, I noticed his gaze on my nylon-covered legs down to my panties. We exchanged smiles as he ordered our drinks, deciding to switch off my phone to avoid any interruptions. I was aware that this night was a one-time event and resolved to save her every moment. There was undeniable chemistry between us, and we conversed as if we were old friends. Finding myself touching his arm and flirting actions I seldom did with anyone, including Jason. I was determined to unleash my inner confidence and relish the experience. After finishing our second glass, the gracious hostess informed us that our table was ready, and escorted us to our seats. The dinner was delightful, and I enjoyed our conversation and time together. When he inquired if I still wanted to spend the night with him, I removed my heels and teasingly placed my foot between his legs. His smile widened upon noticing my red toenails, peeking through the sheer nylon covering my foot. And he suggested it was time to depart. Holding hands, he led me to his pre-booked hotel room. As the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, the reality of what I was about to do hit me. And fleeting thoughts of Jason crossed my mind. Sensing my hesitation, Alexander pulled me close to his sturdy frame. Meeting his gaze, he bestowed upon me a romantic kiss, unlike any I had experienced before. In that moment, all thoughts of my husband and marriage faded away. Tonight, I belonged to him, ready to embrace and revel in this experience. Once in the room, he wasted no time in unzipping my dress when it dropped to the floor. He set his own clothes and stood before me, spinning me around. He praised my appearance and removed my bra before laying me on the bed. The experience was so sensual and loving that I eagerly anticipated what would come next. Kneeling, I devoted 10 minutes to admiring his physique. Overwhelmed, he swiftly removed my pantyhose and insisted I put my heels back on. Finding them alluring, which made me feel somewhat provocative throughout our intimacy. He showered me with kisses, displaying remarkable skill. Fleetingly, I thought I should get Jason to do this. It's so enticing. No, comparing again. Enough. Locking eyes, he uttered, "I love you, Maggie." His unexpected declaration deeply touched me, evoking an almost religious feeling. That moved me to tears of joy. We made love several times that night and once more in the morning. Each encounter as passionate as the last. It marked the pinnacle of my sexual experiences. And I was content for allowing it with Alexander. As thoughts of Jason intruded, I endeavored to focus on the man embracing me tightly. Bathed in sunlight, filtering through the curtains. He tenderly kissed me and caressed my hair, "Maggie. As I mentioned last night, I meant it. You're incredible, so sensual and sexy. And I think I love you. I want to spend more time with you. Can we see each other again?" Apprehension gripped me and I responded gently. "Alexander, it was amazing and you're a wonderful man. But I'm happily married and I can't repeat this. It was a one-time thing and I cherished it. You were fantastic. You were a great lover. And I relished every moment. Maggie, please consider it before you reject me. Your husband doesn't seem to mind and I can make you happy. Just think about it, please, before you decide." "Okay, I'll think about it. But for now, this is the best I can offer," with another deep kiss. He held me close and I surrendered to his embrace. If I weren't married to Jason, I'd be with Alexander in an instant. But Jason is my husband and I hoped he could forgive me for what I had just done. After breakfast, we left the hotel and as Alexander drove me home, I decided to turn on my phone, which had been off since our date the previous night. To my shock, it was flooded with missed calls and texts. Among the messages Jason struck me particularly hard. Inducing a sharp sense of guilt, the realization that his suffering, for which I felt responsible, brought tears to my eyes. Before I had a chance to proceed to the next message, my phone rang just as we were entering my neighborhood. It was my child urgently inquiring about my whereabouts. I reassured them, saying I was nearly home, only to be informed of a fire at our house. The news had been trying to reach me all night, apparently, but my phone had been off. My immediate concern shifted to their father, who, according to my child, was missing. No one knew of his whereabouts and he wasn't responding to calls. With a sinking feeling, I promised to call back as soon as I arrived. Deeply troubled by the unfolding situation. When Alexander turned the corner onto my street, I saw a fire truck and police in front of our house. I didn't see any damage at the front of the house and asked the firefighters what happened. "Are you the owner of the house?" he asked. Since all the neighbors were watching me as I stood with an unfamiliar handsome man, my companion. "Yes, I'm Maggie Spencer." "Well, Mrs. Spencer, we were able to save the house. Only the back porch was damaged, but I'm afraid you won't be able to stay here until you call the experts to clean up the smoke from inside your house. The majority of the damage was to the small cottage behind your home. I'm afraid he's completely lost." I felt my legs give out when Alexander caught me and helped me sit on the curb. "My studio, is she damaged?" "Sorry, Mrs. Spencer, all that's left of her is smoldering ashes. We'll try to figure out the cause of the fire, but in the meantime, the police detective has a few questions for you." I quickly stood up and ran to the back of the house before Sergeant Wilson could ask me any questions. He caught up with me as I stood in front of the remains of my most prized possession. I immediately knew that Jason must have done this as revenge for my actions. "Mrs. Spencer, do you know what happened here?" asked Sergeant Wilson. "No, I wasn't there last night and I have no idea about anything." Are you her husband? He asked, turning to Alexander. No, just a friend. I felt my face turned red with embarrassment as the sergeant gave me a knowing look and asked where my husband was. I said I don't know. When he asked where I was last night, I timidly said that I was with Alexander at the Hilton Hotel in the city center. The looks thrown at me by the sergeant and his assistant made me realize the seriousness of my situation. I just admitted that I didn't spend the night with my husband, who also disappeared. The detective now had questions. Mrs. Spencer, are you and your husband separated? Do you know where he was last night? No, we are a happy married couple. And then I realized how stupid it sounded after admitting that I spent the night with another man. Do you know where he is? No, he doesn't answer calls. We'll want to talk to him. So when you talk to him, please give him my number. He said, handing me his business card. I was shaking with anger and fear, anger at the loss of my refuge and all the work I had created over the years. Everything is gone forever. Fear of thinking that Jason could be so angry as to do this and what it would mean for my marriage. I needed to talk to him as soon as possible. I called Brandy. Brandy? Do you know where your father is? No, I haven't talked to him since yesterday evening. Why didn't you stay here with him like we planned? Mom, he threw me out and said that I was no longer his daughter. Hearing these words, I felt a chill rush through my body. Jason would never utter such words. And if he did, it would be even worse than I imagined. Upon entering the house, I noticed smoke damage on the walls and detected a foul odor lingering in our home. It was clear that staying here in such conditions was impossible. As I moved around our house, I decided to gather some clothes and personal belongings for a few days. However, as I entered the bedroom, I was surprised to discover everything missing, causing terror to rise within me. Realizing that all of my clothes, shoes, and personal possessions were vanished, my heart plummeted as I searched my nightstand for my wedding rings, only to find them missing. Why did I leave my rings behind? What was I thinking? If Jason had seen them on my dresser, he would have believed I had abandoned him and our marriage. How foolish and selfish of me. In a condition of extreme panic, I checked every room in the house, only to discover that all of my belongings were missing. A terrifying thought crossed my thoughts. Had he indeed ruined everything? Was nothing left? I rushed out of the home and returned to the studio to study the remnants more thoroughly. Among the wreckage, I discovered picture frames and partially damaged clothing. It was clear that Jason had not only accepted my departure, but had annihilated everything significant to me, effectively wiping me out of his life in one fast strike. I called Brandy in tears, telling her what had happened and expressing my need for a place to stay. Alexander quickly provided me accommodations, but he was the last person I wanted to see. I politely rejected, stating that I wanted alone and asking him to leave. He left, hurt by my abruptness, leaving me to reflect on my actions and the man with whom I had spent the night. Though I knew I was at fault, I couldn't help but hate him for my selfish betrayal. When the true blame rested with me. Brandy, I have lost your father. Mom, do not say that. Dad loves you, honey. He incinerated everything. My wardrobe, artworks and studio, everything. He left me with nothing. Not even a place to stay. He ignores my calls and does not answer. I have hurt him the most, and I do not blame him. What I did is unforgivable. I should not have been on that date. I should have just spoken to him. We could have worked it out. But my selfishness sent him away. If I were in his position, I wouldn't be able to go back. What should I do now? I don't have a home or clothes. Mom, do not blame yourself. I share some of the blame. And you are welcome to stay with us till your home is rebuilt. We will get you new clothes this afternoon and have you settled in by the evening. Brandy, all of my artworks, paintings and sculptures are gone. 30 years of marriage and 2 decades of artistic accomplishments were gone, leaving me completely alone. I have nothing more to live for. Maggie sobbed loudly as neighbors looked at her from the street. God, your father is phoning. I will call you back. She nearly fainted while struggling with the buttons and anxiously attempted to answer the phone. But she was able to connect just in time. Jason, is this you? Hello, Maggie. How are you? Jason, where are you? Please come home. We need to talk. No, Maggie, I already know everything from your daughter. Yes, it is your daughter, not mine. You're both dead to me. And this might be our last discussion. Jason, please do not say that. I love you. This is something you should know. Jason, the studio no longer exists. Have you done this? Maggie, you did it. Not me, perhaps not literally, but it was burned by your deception and betrayal. You died in my heart when I saw your wedding rings discarded and you giving yourself up for another. Your deeds are unforgivable. And Brandy's involvement is humiliating and incomprehensible. We finished. I'll meet with lawyers on Monday to begin proceedings. Please, Jason, can we talk about this and settle it? You cannot simply toss our 30 good years like this. Maggie, we're talking. And I am not the one who squandered our 30 beautiful years. You planned betrayal, showered me with affection for 2 weeks to ease your guilt and then betrayed me with your daughter's help. There is no one on earth who could accept or forgive such treachery and betrayal. It was purely evil. And I hope you'll regret that for the rest of your sad life. This is our final conversation. You can contact me through my attorney's information, which will be issued with the divorce decree. Goodbye, Maggie. Jason, no wait, Jason was gone. And so was the world I loved. Brandy arrived right as I was on the phone with Jason, who had already hung up. We embraced each other while grieving over our loss. Finally, we decided we couldn't stay in the rubble of my home while the fire and police investigated. So we went to Brandy's house. Upon her arrived, she briefed Mike on everything, startling him with the details. Brandy tried to explain everything, but when Mike realized his wife had set up a date for her friend's father with her own mother, he was shocked and enraged. His rage flared. Brandy, you arranged a date for your mother with another man knowing that Dad would be left alone. You should have known he would never take it. What type of man allows his wife to go on a date with someone else? Is this what you intend to do when we are older? Will you willingly betray me as Mom did to Dad? He was a nice man. And you and Mom were his entire universe. What did you do, Brandy? Let me inform you. You damaged a fine man and compelled him to do unbelievable things. I cannot describe how disappointed I am in you, Brandy. Once everything is over, I will contact him and apologize for your idiocy. You and I need to discuss our future together. Having children with you is on hold while I figure out where you stand. I'll be straightforward with you. I do not share your ideals and I will not tolerate this kind of betrayal. His outburst stunned her. She was surprised by his lack of understanding for her mother's position. It was only one date after 30 years of marriage, for goodness sake. So what? Later she recognized that the real issue was the dissolution of her parents' marriage, her father's loss and her mother's broken happiness. They'd soon confront the consequences of her deeds. After 5 long days, I returned home to evaluate the damage. To avoid incurring further expenditures, I decided not to file an insurance claim. In my lawyer's meeting, I made it obvious that the house was mine. It's not up for argument. Maggie may get half of our savings but no child support. If she refused, I'd sue for adultery and reveal her affair with her daughter's friend's father. Divorce proceedings were already in action. I also sought counsel. Criminal arson charges were filed, but I discovered that without an insurance claim, the case was unlikely to advance unless I filed a fake report. When Brandy returned home and walked inside, a neighbor with whom she had gone to school called her. Brandy rushed up to me. I was inspecting the damage and determining what repairs the house need. I heard the front door open. "Hey Dad, where are you now?" Brandy's voice reverberated throughout the home as she entered. I remained mute, concentrating on surveying the damage. Maggie used to find solace in looking out the window at the pile of ashes. I couldn't help smiling. Brandy found me in one of the bedrooms and hurried over, hugging me. "I'm sorry, Daddy. Please forgive us. We love you, Brandy." "I cannot forgive either of you. I've previously said don't talk to me again. Please let go and leave me alone. You say you are my daughter, so I must forgive you. Listen, you are no longer my daughter. Simply a deceptive individual who crushed my heart. Now leave me alone, Dad. Mom needs you. She lives with us and misses you deeply. She cries all the time and wishes to apologize to you for her error. Can you come to our place to visit her?" Never. When she went on that date and stayed with another man, our marriage was over. She even left her wedding rings behind, marking the end of our marriage. It's over and I won't speak with her again. Both of you can contact me through my lawyer. I'll be getting a new phone and number today. However, for the time being, you should return to your unfaithful mother. Are you truly willing to give up 30 years of happiness with Mom? No, not me. Your mother threw away those 30 years. As soon as she removed her rings and went to her sweetheart, you and your mother shattered my 30 years of bliss. And for that, I will never forgive or forget. Get out of my house for a second time." Brandy cried when she left her childhood home. Her father's words, declaring she was no longer his daughter, were devastating. Even years of therapy couldn't take away the sorrow from his comments. Maggie crumpled the divorce papers the next day, understanding her romance had ended her marriage. She tried to reason, went to counseling and spoke with Jason, but none of her attempts were successful. He severed off touch with both her and Brandy. Mike eventually approached Jason, expressing his outrage and displeasure with their behavior. He questioned having children as a result of Brandy's treachery and is currently undergoing couples counseling to repair their marriage. Maggie intended to return home once Jason renovated it, but the divorce decreed it was his. She received half of their savings and $3,000 a month in child support for 10 years, despite his refusal to pay. Now she needs to find work. After 30 years of relying on Jason, she relocated from her daughter's home to a small apartment near the city center, working at an art gallery to supplement her income. Maggie's artistic independence was abruptly threatened. She will no longer spend all of her time in Jason's beautiful studio. She can't sit in front of her creative work, admiring the lake view through the large windows her husband gave her. Soon work will absorb her, leaving her with no time to restore her previous life. Her leisure time had evaporated, along with her wealth and married joy, all for a single reckless night with another man. She'll never have enough tears to wash away the pain created by that one error. No, Jason, her dear spouse, will never talk with her again. Brandy's heart was devastated when she heard he had disowned their daughter. She fell into sadness over her parents and parted to save her own marriage, which is now coming apart. She sought treatment from a therapist. Months later the home was repaired, Jason completed the court-ordered payments and subsequently sold the residence, suddenly following the sale. Maggie arrived to reconcile only to discover a young couple at the door. "Hello, can we help you?" the woman inquired. "I am looking for Jason Spencer, is he here?" "No, he sold our house and departed to start a new life. He was quite kind." "Are you Maggie?" "Yes, that is me. I think he left an envelope for me." "Indeed, I will read it later. Goodbye. Enjoy your new home." Maggie sobbed, understanding she would never see Jason again and grieving the love she had recklessly wasted in her lonely apartment. She opened the mail with nervous hands. Maggie's age is 3 decades, and to think I could have used that time more effectively, like as watching paint dry or counting the grass blades on our lawn. It's pretty funny how I once thought I couldn't be the husband you needed. Clearly, you needed a circus, not a partner. Consider your shenanigans. You wanted more. Well, congratulations for finally finding it outside of marriage. Bravo. Those 2 weeks you spent playing your adoring wife should have realized it was only the beginning. This is the prelude to your grand betrayal. I got fooled. You completely duped me with your Oscar-worthy performance. I was preparing a beautiful night to honor us, and you were out celebrating yourself with someone else. Maggie, you didn't simply break us. You blasted us out of space. So I did us both a favor by disappearing. That's correct. I left the circus to the clowns and moved on to better pastures. Do not bother trying to find me. I'm buried beneath layers of new cities and faces that don't include you or our girls. Starting afresh, you bet this time no drama. And what about our home? Consider it another casualty in your selfish fight. We sold it. Perhaps the new owners can rid it of the stench of betrayal. Do you seek closure? Consider this letter to be it. Let's wrap it up. Tie it with a ribbon and place it in the back of the closet. You keep making bad decisions. Maggie, like your loyalty, may be fleeting, but here's to your new beginnings. Farewell from the man who once loved you. Jesus. She thought she was over the tears, but after reading his note, she couldn't stop crying all night, gripping her knees firmly. The excitement and recollections of the fantastic times with Alexander faded, replaced by regret and grief. Now 52 and alone, she felt her future without Jason seemed bleak. She gave up her luxurious lifestyle for a moment of wild pleasure. Jason confronted Alexander late at night right before he was set to leave for his new home in Ecuador. The door swung open. Jason burst in and announced that he was the husband of the woman Alexander had taken from him. Alexander attempted to justify that he thought Maggie was fine with it and would not have pursued her differently. However, it was all in vain. Jason would not hear any of it. The hatred, wrath, and suffering he'd been suppressing for months were unleashed on the man in front of him. The encounter was brief because Jason resorted to using a crowbar. Alexander's life changed dramatically in a matter of seconds. Before Jason left for his waiting Uber to catch a flight out of the country, he warned Alexander about the perils of becoming involved with a married woman. By the time Alexander arrived at the hospital clinic to report the attack, Jason had already moved into his Burnaby oceanfront apartment. He had to start again without his previous burdens and family. It took detectives 2 weeks to discover that Jason had left the nation, and they understood they couldn't follow him unless he returned, even if they found him. Ecuador does not extradite for assault accusations. Alexander spent 2 excruciating weeks in the hospital and months of physical therapy to get back on his feet with new knees. Unfortunately, the 25 stitches on his face will always remind him of that night. And the married woman is concerned about his future. He knew his former life had ended because of the 2 women who convinced him to kidnap another man's wife. He never again contacted Maggie or Brandy. Mike, Brandy's husband, almost left her because of what transpired, but a psychotherapist helped Brandy understand the mistake of her ways, and she promised to stay true to Mike and their future family. Mike waited 2 years before deciding to have children. He needed to be certain that his wife would not deceive him in the same way that she had her own father, while also keeping his commitment and her remorse in mind. Jason terminated all relations with Brandy. When Maggie and Brandy discovered Alexander's assault, she lost her father's admiration for good. They were heartbroken and felt guilty about their role in the violence, which added to Jason's remorse and suffering as well as the split of their family. This was another indication that their decisions had unintended repercussions. They realized that their naive belief that letting Maggie that one indiscretion would keep their lives pleasant was absolutely mistaken. Their miscalculation demonstrated that bliss was very far from reality. Their father and husband's absence caused them great pain, a burden they would bear for the rest of their lives. Overwhelmed by melancholy and age, she never found another companion and lived a life of loneliness and regret. Her aspirations of growing old alongside Jason and spending time with their grandchildren went away. Jason stopped paying child support after leaving the country. Her financial situation was uncertain, so she had to work to make ends meet. Nightly crying became her new normal. I currently have over $750,000 after selling my property and saving over the last 3 decades. After using this money to buy my new home, I hope to spend the next 30 years in Ecuador living comfortably and peacefully. The local young and gorgeous women appreciate a giving American and I enjoy their company. Half a year after that awful night sitting on the beach across from my new home in Port Lopez with a cold drink, I understood that divorce is a reality. Here is the next story. I'm Becky. I've been married to my hubby for 3 years now. He's been preoccupied with work during that period. I rarely get home. Loneliness became my constant companion and I began to feel as if I were living on a deserted island within our own home. The last 3 years have been quite bleak and I had envisioned a marriage in which my husband would be present and engaged. But reality had different intentions. My spouse Andrew is a 28-year-old surgeon. You can imagine how demanding that position is. The man's schedule is nuts with crazy long hours and even night shifts that spill into the next day. Sundays. It's like ships passing in the night. I hardly get to see him weekends. Well, they might as well be work days because he's often stuck at the hospital. Our relationship has taken a hit and we hardly communicate like a normal couple. We've abandoned regular date nights and attending events together. Now Andrew feels like a stranger and our quality time has vanished into thin air. This isn't what I signed up for. It's definitely not what I had in mind when we tied the knot. I get it. His job is a big deal and I'm not trying to be selfish here. But let me tell you, it's been a mental drain. I've tried everything to make this marriage work. Even sitting down for a heart-to-heart with Andrew, all he seems to talk about is how demanding his job is. There was even a day when I waited patiently for my husband to return home so we could have a chat. But he quickly came up with an excuse, claiming he was too tired and not in the mood for a conversation. Yep, you read that right? Andrew said it. Me just trying to have a decent conversation with the man I married and it ends up making me seem like a nagging wife. Someone who's always giving her husband a hard time when he gets home. It's almost as if I'm married to a stranger now because the Andrew I knew is nowhere to be found. This is not the same guy I dated back then. He showered me with attention and all the care in the world. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not lacking in material comforts or anything like that. My husband works hard to provide for both of us and we're financially stable. But you see, I'm still longing for his emotional attention. Money isn't everything, at least not for me. Andrew just doesn't seem to grasp that his wife also needs some TLC. The kind of attention he gives to his patients at the hospital. He's under the impression that everything's hunky-dory with me because I have all the comforts a wife could ask for to make her home cozy. But when was the last time we even went out together or attended an event like a regular couple? I remember going to a fundraiser all by myself once, feeling incredibly lonely as I watched other couples enjoying themselves. It felt like I was flying solo and folks kept asking where Andrew was. I had to come up with excuses for him covering for his absence. It happens quite often and sometimes it makes me wonder if he's doing it on purpose or if there's something fishy going on. Maybe he's having an affair with a coworker using his job as a smoke screen. Who knows? I even tried to throw a surprise birthday party for Andrew once. I invited some friends since our families live far away. But things didn't go as planned and I had to rely on our friends to make it a memorable day for him. On the morning of his birthday, I did my best to wish him a happy birthday before heading off to work. We both woke up that morning and I greeted him with birthday wishes, even singing a little birthday song to put a smile on his face. He seemed happy and I could see a grin on his face as he left for work. Once he was out the door, I got to work on the party plans. I rented a hall and with the help of our friends decorated it to make it look festive. To add a personal touch, I baked a delightful cake for Andrew and arranged for all the food and drinks for the guests. I sent out a message to our friends urging them not to spill the beans and spoil the surprise. Everyone cooperated and Andrew remained clueless about the impending celebration. Everything was ready to roll. People started arriving at the venue about 30 minutes before the scheduled party time, which was at 8 o'clock. The saxophonist and the music band were all set and everything was going according to my plan. All that was left was for the birthday boy Andrew to show up. The anticipation was building among the guests, eager to see the man of the hour. With my phone in hand, I decided to give Andrew a call to let him know about the surprise party. I explained that I wanted his 28th birthday to be a special and memorable one. My way of showing him just how much I loved and still loved him. Andrew hadn't always been like this and it wasn't about his work. It was his attitude and the lack of attention that was taking a toll on my mental and emotional well-being. This all started when he got promoted at work. I'm not saying his promotion is a bad thing, but it's had its downsides. I barely see him at home anymore, so there I was trying to reach him on the phone, but for the first 2 minutes his line was unreachable. I stayed patient and kept trying, feeling desperate to get a hold of him. After a few minutes of no luck, I turned to Andrew's close friend Lee. Stan and Andrew had been pals since childhood and they shared a strong bond. I pulled Stan aside, not wanting to create a scene and explain the situation. Andrew's phone was out of reach. Stan took it upon himself to help and dialed Andrew's number, but it still wasn't getting through. At that moment, my mind was flooded with various thoughts. I couldn't help but wonder if Andrew had chosen to celebrate his birthday with the woman he might be cheating on me with at some fancy restaurant. Meanwhile, I had been busy arranging a surprise birthday party for him. I got lost in my thoughts until Stanley suggested that I send him a text message and give calling him another shot. So I tried calling him once more and this time it actually went through. I was thrilled because Andrew's phone was finally reachable. My excitement soared and I anxiously waited for him to pick up. I kept dialing and texting, hoping he'd answer. But to my disappointment, Andrew didn't respond to any of my attempts. This only added to my frustration and I was getting seriously ticked off. Stanley also made several attempts to reach him, but like me, he received no response. Just that the guests were starting to get restless and were asking questions about what was happening. It had been a whole hour and there was no sign of the birthday boy anywhere in the hall. Stanley suggested, I keep trying to call Andrew while he tried to calm down the guests. Somehow he managed to convince them to stay a bit longer and return to where I was. We continued our attempts to reach Andrew, but it seemed like he had vanished into thin air. It was a pretty awful situation, guys. I'm not kidding. I was utterly embarrassed. At that point, it was far from being funny. How could I invite my friends and Andrew's friends to come and surprise him? Only for him to keep us waiting like that. It felt like all my efforts had been in vain. What was I supposed to tell all those people who had gathered there? The person for whom I had organized the surprise? My husband was ignoring my calls and messages. I couldn't believe what was unfolding. By 9:30, Andrew was still nowhere to be seen. The guests, understandably, began to leave one by one. Utterly disgusted by how I had managed to waste their time with a birthday party that the guest of honor hadn't even attended. It was one of those moments where I wished I could hide my face due to the negative comments and disappointment in the air as the guests departed. It left only Stanley and me in the now empty hall. I felt deeply betrayed and furious about how everything had turned out. Stanley advised me to head home while he handled the situation there. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, crying my eyes out. I couldn't help but wonder what I had done to deserve such treatment. I kept asking myself why Andrew had suddenly changed. We used to be so different. So what had caused this shift? These thoughts swirled in my head as I drove home. My emotions in turmoil. Upon arriving home, I made my way to the bedroom, waiting for Andrew to return. A few minutes later, he came back and found me there, utterly distraught. He asked me what was wrong and I inquired about his phone's whereabouts. My husband's phone wasn't on silent or anything like that, which left me puzzled. I asked him if he hadn't seen my calls or messages, but all he offered was an apology, stating he couldn't pick up calls or respond to texts at that time. There was no curiosity about why I had been continuously calling or any hint of remorse. That night, Andrew and I engaged in a heated argument. I expressed my disappointment and frustration about how I had gone to great lengths to plan a surprise birthday celebration for him, inviting friends to join in only for him to ruin it. Andrew stuck to his usual excuse of being swamped with work, leaving me even more irritated. I eventually stormed out of the room, unable to bear the situation any longer. As the weeks passed, Andrew's late-night shifts grew more grueling. It was as though his profession was tailor-made for late hours. We stopped watching movies together, sharing meals and following our usual daily routines. It felt like living in a state of turmoil. I had chosen to be a full-time housewife after discussions with Andrew before we got married. I agreed to it, but I never anticipated it would turn out like this. It was not the life I had envisioned and I had no intention of continuing down this path. It wasn't that I had a problem with being at home and taking care of our family and household. What was truly frustrating was having a partner who didn't give me any attention, or make an effort to spend time bonding as a couple. I couldn't even recall the last time Andrew had given me a gift. I was pretty sure he had forgotten our anniversary date. If he couldn't show up for his own surprise birthday party, there was no way he'd be present for our anniversary. I had reached a breaking point with Andrew's indifferent behavior and I was fed up. The way I communicated with my husband had completely deteriorated. He wouldn't answer my calls or respond to any text messages. And when he came home late at night, having a conversation with him was next to impossible. This abrupt change drove me to seek attention elsewhere and I ended up cheating. Yes, it's true. I cheated on Andrew. I started spending time with an old friend from college named Patrick. Patrick was a year ahead of me in school and was considered one of the most attractive guys on campus. One day while scrolling through my Facebook news feed, I received a friend request from Patrick, which I accepted without any ulterior motives. We began chatting casually for a few weeks, sharing details about our daily lives. Our conversations deepened and we exchanged contact information. Patrick and I started texting and talking on the phone late into the night. And sometimes he would even come over to keep me company. What began innocently soon turned into a close bond. And we went on a few secret dates together. Yes, guys, Patrick knew I was married but had no knowledge of Andrew. So we kept our relationship hidden. This continued for a couple of months and it felt like I was rediscovering myself. I had almost forgotten that I was married because of how Andrew had treated me in the past. Patrick provided all the attention I had longed for. He noticed every little detail and made sure to bring a smile to my face. It felt surreal because I never thought someone could listen to me and give me the undivided attention I craved. I began to feel like Patrick might be the one for me and slowly but surely I pushed Andrew out of my mind. I never planned to cheat on my husband or do anything to harm our marriage. Andrew couldn't see how his late-night shifts and constant absence at night were straining our relationship. He couldn't balance his personal life and career, and yes, I held him responsible for it. I blamed him for choosing work over our marriage and for giving me less attention than he gave to his job. I didn't regret being with Patrick. It made me feel alive for the past few months. Last Friday around noon, my husband Andrew returned from work carrying some bags, probably filled with items from the store. I was quite surprised to see him coming home early at that time because he rarely does so in the afternoon. In fact, there were times when he wouldn't return until the following day. He approached me with the bags and handed them over, saying he got them for me. I looked puzzled and asked if everything was all right with him, to which he replied in the affirmative. Guys, Andrew had bought me a dress, a wristwatch, a bag and a pair of shoes. He suggested that I try them on because he wanted to take me out for dinner. Yes, you heard that right. Dinner. It was the first time in a long while that my husband wanted to take me out. I had lost count of the last time he had done so. This moment was bitter-sweet for me. It was bitter because I was already involved with someone else. Yet sweet because my husband was finally making an effort to spend time with me. Andrew continued with the sudden change in behavior. He started taking me out, showering me with gifts, going on dates with me and attending social events together. We began to spend quality time together like couples typically do. He no longer came home late at night, and his night shifts became less frequent on our anniversary. Andrew threw me a surprise party and offered to make apologies for his treatment of me. I was actually pleased to see my spouse admitting his mistakes and wishing to make things right again. I loved those moments for a long time, knowing that Andrew was unaware of my infidelity. He had no idea I had cheated on him when he wasn't paying attention to me. You might be wondering what occurred between me and Patrick, right? Not much, actually. Patrick and I continued to see one another as we had been. I believed Andrew's alteration was only temporary, but it lasted for months. He no longer worked on weekends, so we spent that time watching movies and cooking together. I missed the days when Andrew and I cooked, cleaned, and did housework together. Things were amazing back then. Andrew and I used to be quite close, but things changed when he was promoted at work. He became too busy, leaving me feeling lonely and abandoned at home. However, the last few months have been a wonderful shift, as my spouse has finally begun to give me the attention I have craved. We reunited and formed strong bonds during this time. On the other hand, Patrick, my affair partner, was becoming increasingly demanding. He felt that I was ignoring him since Andrew began paying more attention to me. He wasn't completely wrong about it. Andrew's newfound attention prompted me to dwell on my behavior, and I began to feel bad. However, I couldn't totally blame myself for the disaster I had created. I spent a long time thinking about the matter before deciding that I needed to be honest with Andrew. I wanted to make amends by admitting that I had cheated on him with Patrick, a former schoolmate. The guilt was eating at me, and I couldn't take it any longer. I called Patrick and stopped our relationship, stating that I couldn't continue seeing him and that I wanted to work things out with Andrew. Patrick didn't take it well and kept trying to contact me. I had to ban his calls and texts and tell him not to see me again, especially since Andrew was spending more time at home these days. A few weeks after breaking up with Patrick, the guilt remained heavy on me. Andrew's presence and total unawareness of my infidelity tore me apart. I knew that if Andrew found out it should be from me and no one else. I tried to confess multiple times but was too terrified of his reaction. So I decided to wait for the appropriate time to tell my spouse the truth. One day, while Andrew and I were sitting at home watching a movie, I found the confidence to admit that I had been having an affair with Patrick for the previous 8 weeks. I felt really apprehensive, but I observed he was entirely absorbed in the TV show and didn't seem to notice my anxiety. So I got the bravery to pick up the remote and press the pause button. Andrew was surprised by my interruption and questioned what was so necessary that I had to interrupt his presentation. He sat down in front of me and inquired as to why I appeared so concerned. After taking a deep breath, I had the confidence to reveal the truth about my affair with Patrick. As I began to tell Andrew the specifics, I could see the astonishment and wrath on his face. His reaction grew swiftly and he ended up tossing his glass of wine into the wall in a fit of wrath with each word I said. Andrew's rage seemed to escalate and he began smashing things around the room. I was afraid and felt compelled to flee the developing situation. So I fled the house and found safety with my sister Trisha. I told Trisha the whole story, explaining why I had cheated on Andrew. Trisha was first unhappy with me for hiding such a huge secret from her for so long. But gradually she attempted to calm me down. She suggested I phone Andrew so she could talk to him and possibly help defuse the tension. I called Andrew but he did not answer or respond to any of my messages. Trisha and I called for almost half an hour but received no response from my husband. My sister advised me to rest and said we could contact Andrew again in the morning. I awoke early and dialed his number, which went through for a brief while before becoming unavailable. I kept trying but it appeared like Andrew had stopped my calls and messages. I urgently wanted to speak with him and explain why I had done what I did. After weeks of no communication from Andrew, Trisha decided to take me back to the house. When we arrived we saw Andrew attempting to get into his car and leave the compound. I dashed over to him trying to speak things over but my attempts to communicate were hopeless. Andrew slammed the car door in my face and told our gatekeeper to eject me out of the property before speeding away. It was a devastating blow and my heart broke into pieces. How did I find myself in such a bad situation? Andrew would not even give me a second glance. I felt as if I had repulsed him from going with Trisha. My heart felt heavy with sorrow. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to our former beloved home. My 3-year marriage looked to be dissolving right before my eyes and sliding through my fingers. I wished Andrew could see things from my point of view and realize how his late-night shift, demanding work schedule and lack of attention were pushing me to the edge. I wanted to describe how I had begged for his attention while silently suffering in his absence. Now I was starting to regret being clean and telling the truth. How could he treat me like this after I opted to be open with him rather than keep him in the dark? But this is only the top of the iceberg. Andrew saw payback and it was a wicked and unexpected retaliation. I had no notion I was living with a person capable of such brutality. Yes, it is reasonable for him to react angrily when he learns of my affair. But what he did far beyond my expectations. His vengeance destroyed me entirely. It was like he had been planning this all along, waiting for the right moment to seduce me. Perhaps he had suspicions and just wanted confirmation, and I played straight into his hands like an idiot. This event undoubtedly taught me a great lesson. After several months I hadn't heard from Andrew. I was feeling increasingly upset and eager to make things right between us, so I decided to pay him a visit at his home. When I arrived, the gatekeeper refused to let me enter the compound, citing Andrew's tight orders. I appealed with him but he stood firm. Andrew made it obvious that he did not want me anywhere near the residence. After a heated exchange with the gatekeeper, I was eventually let to enter the compound. I darted by him and into the house, surprised and indignant. The old passcode still worked and I couldn't help but experience a feeling of nostalgia as I stepped into what was once my home. It had been extremely silent and Andrew was nowhere to be seen inside. However, his automobile was parked outside. I proceeded further into the home hoping to locate Andrew in our bedroom. Sadly, he wasn't. He seemed to have left before I arrived in the neighborhood. I spent a while feeling sorry for myself before realizing that my side of the closet was absolutely empty. I initially felt my vision was playing tricks on me, but it turned out that I was seeing clearly. None of my stuff remained in the house, which surprised me because I hadn't had time to pack them before leaving abruptly. Fearing Andrew would harm me, I had borrowed my sister's things throughout my stay with her and none of my luggage, clothes, or shoes remained. Even my childhood photos and personal belongings were gone. The room appeared to be completely new to me. I was taken aback, and if Andrew had been present at the time, I would have given him a piece of my mind. I had hoped to locate some clothing to wear because I was weary of borrowing from my sister's closet. Andrew had pulled a dirty trick on me and I waited breathlessly for his return. All of the terror that had been gnawing at me had evaporated and I was no longer afraid of facing him alone. After what seemed like an age and being troubled by the gatekeeper who was concerned about Andrew's reaction to finding me in his home, I eventually heard the front door creak open. I dashed downstairs, believing Andrew had returned. To my astonishment, instead of Andrew, I saw a tall woman at the door. I was taken aback and asked her if she was lost, since that was the only plausible explanation I could think of for a stranger being there. The woman chuckled and redirected the topic to me, wondering if I was the one who was lost. I was annoyed and demanded to know who she was. She presented herself as Andrew's girlfriend, and for a brief minute I assumed she was joking, but she wasn't. In that instant, my world was broken once more. The fact that Andrew had a girlfriend killed me. My thoughts raced through countless situations, none of which were pleasant. I couldn't help but think she might have been the same lady he was cheating on me with. I may have been overthinking things, but I was unable to make sensible conclusions. When she instructed me to leave, I was taken aback by her audacity. I identified myself as Andrew's wife, but she was already aware of this. Then she had the gall to tell me that I was about to become the ex-wife. Honestly, I wanted to confront her right then and then, but I was able to keep myself under control. I asked about my possessions and where she had stored them. She admitted to getting rid of most of my belongings and selling the rest because Andrew had handed her everything, telling her to do whatever she wished. My restraint failed, and I grabbed her shirt. My rage overtook all sense of reason. I grabbed her hair and demanded the location of my childhood photos. She told me coldly that she torched everything. I was enraged, and I believe I almost pulled her hair out of her scalp. She tried to struggle, but I had a substantial size advantage, and she was too surprised to fight. It's astounding that Andrew had the audacity to do this to me. How could he trust a stranger with my belongings? How could he put a complete stranger in charge of my childhood photos? The garment bags and cartons, while significant, do not hurt as much as those pictures. Even the jewelry and makeup cannot compensate for the loss of those treasured photographs. My biological father died before I was born, so I lived with my stepfather and mother my entire childhood. My stepfather was not the best father figure, and I was counting down the days until I could marry and be independent from that household. I had taken all of my photographs with me since I did not want to leave any behind. That is why it hurts so much that Andrew handed up those photos to a complete stranger. Nobody can console me. Andrew was well aware of the sentimental value I placed on those images, which made his actions much more distressing. I had already addressed this with him, so I am confident that he chose that option on purpose. As I wrestled with the woman, Andrew entered the house. He dashed toward us and quickly separated us. Little did I know that the gatekeeper had notified him of my presence while he was working. I questioned Andrew about his behavior, but he remained silent. He grabbed my hand and forced me out of the house, telling me to leave and never return. I was astounded that he had taken notice of a complete stranger without first hearing my side of the story. I could not believe what Andrew had done, so tears welled up in my eyes. I never expected such a callous gesture from him. When I asked why he let that woman destroy my childhood photos, Andrew coldly said that he couldn't care less about what happened to me. I asked him if he was aware of the repercussions of his conduct, as his response would influence my next step. He admitted that he was fully aware and that he had issued the commands in a fit of fury. I slapped him across the face and he was surprised by my actions. He attempted to confront me again, but the gatekeeper intervened and stopped him. Nothing Andrew had ever done had affected me as much as this treachery. How could he? My entire childhood was wiped away. I left the house and that was my final encounter with Andrew. I opted to go to my stepfather and mother's place because my sister could hardly feed both of us. However, when I arrived, I was confronted with another stunning news. I discovered that Andrew had a conversation with my mother and stepfather in which he detailed everything that happened between us. This hit me hard because my parents are deeply religious and have no tolerance for infidelity or dishonesty. They refused to let me back into their home after knowing what had happened. My own mother turned me away. I had low expectations for my stepfather because we were never close. But my mother's response startled me. I left their house and returned to my sister's, where I told her the entire story. She offered to help me, but I told her that I would move out in 2 months. It's been 2 weeks and I'm currently considering my choices for getting back on my feet. Frankly, the truth did not save me at all. It simply caused me additional sorrow and pain. I regret being honest with him. Perhaps it would have been preferable to speak a white lie. This incident has made me wary about the future. I have no intention of seeing Andrew again, and I intend to petition for divorce. I've been waiting for him to start the divorce process, but I haven't heard from him yet. Nonetheless, I am determined to go through with it, and I will undoubtedly pursue alimony, spousal support, or whatever it is called. That man truly done me wrong, and I intend to do what is best for myself. An update about my life. Being single is not as glamorous as it is frequently portrayed. I'm not having as much fun as I expected from being alone, lol. To be honest, I never expected to have fun, but I believe keeping a sense of humor helps me deal with the obstacles I'm encountering. For the first time in my life, I am completely self-sufficient, and it is one of the most empowering experiences I have ever had. I was ready to leave my stepfather's home, so I married shortly. But now that I'm on my own, I'm discovering the true definition of independence. I filed for divorce and had it finalized within 3 months. Andrew and his lawyer offered me a fair compensation, and I'm now financially stable. As soon as my lawyer saw the arrangement, he strongly recommended me to accept it. I believe Andrew knew the magnitude of his devastation to me when everything was said and done. My emotions were conflicted, a blend of bitterness and relief. I said goodbye to my sister's residence and found a rented flat for myself. I have a degree in history and am presently gainfully working. I recently received my first paycheck. Meanwhile, Andrew and his new girlfriend have been spotted out and about frequently with photos circulating on social media. It's strange because he was never very into social media during our time together. He suddenly had a strong desire to share online. When Andrew was with me, he frequently claimed to be preoccupied with work. But all of a sudden he began making an attempt to spend more time on social media. I finally realized that he began paying additional attention to me on purpose. After his friend Stanley advised him that if he did not give me the attention I desired, I might cheat. He was worried about being embarrassed after what happened at his birthday celebration. So he wanted to save face with his pals. Apparently, they had discussed the subject behind his back and he wished to avoid more disgrace. However, I've moved on from all of this, and when Stanley approached me for a talk, I declined. I'm no longer interested in him and would prefer to keep my distance. Andrew is now a part of my past, and I sincerely hope I never meet another guy like him. I may regret telling the truth, but I am relieved that I did. It's a mixed bag of feelings, but maybe everything happened for a reason. So, that's where I am now. I'm focused on my profession and I make sure to get a good night's sleep, so that I can begin my work day early. Here is the next story. I was an alcoholic who emotionally assaulted my wife. She sent me divorce papers, but I got clean and changed my life. We're attempting to reconcile, but my guilt is crushing me. My wife, 31, and I, a 27-year-old guy, have hit a hard patch. And have been apart at home for about a year. It was mainly my fault. Following the death of my father, I experienced a significant setback. I became alcoholic and depressed, stopped caring for myself, and neglected her when I wasn't emotionally abusing her. She finally had enough, and after I refused therapy for the time being, she called a divorce lawyer and drafted paperwork. I signed them off right away, but she did not, keeping them in her chamber. She knew I was struggling financially, so she claimed she'd wait for me to receive my inheritance so I could move out. Then she would sign and petition for a no-fault divorce. Not from the United States. In our country, you can do it. After spending 2 months sleeping in my home office, I got sick of it and quit drinking. I jumped right into work and did tasks around the house, as well as helping her out when she saw my transformation. I boasted that I was doing it for myself, not her. And she consented because although she wanted me to leave, she still cared about me. Over the last month, she has also periodically asked me to sleep on her bed, rather than in my home office. Nothing intimate happened, yet she still spooned me. This lasted until last evening. We had become closer, especially during the holidays. And I informed her what I had said was not true. To demonstrate to her that I had changed, I initially stopped drinking. But then I decided I wanted to turn a new page and be a good soon-to-be ex-husband. She walked to her room, pulled up the divorce papers, and placed them in front of me. She wondered what we should do with them. So I ripped them and she yelled aloud, "Yeah," and then hugged me. So I guess we won't be getting divorced every day. Update 1. Hello, everyone. I wrote a week ago about what had happened the night before. After over a year of living apart at home, my soon-to-be ex-wife expressed her desire to reconcile. So I wrote the divorce papers in front of her, much to her delight. However, soon after I realized that I had planned my entire new year on the fact that I was getting divorced, and that the decision to reconcile actually caused me uncertainty and anxiety. My wife observed this, and we discussed it several times. During such conversations, there were discussions, chuckles, and even tears. Good, liberating tears. My wife cries very infrequently, if ever. She's the tough kind, but witnessing her breakdown in sobs, sobbing about how much I wounded her and how much she still loves me, felt like being stabbed in the heart. I understood the agony I caused her was still acute and scorching. She unloaded all of the anguish and upheaval I had caused her with my previous behavior, admitting she was both pleased and furious about my adjustments over the prior year. Proud that I turned my life around. Bitter because I had accepted the divorce so swiftly. As if she were the one holding me back, and she didn't deserve my greatest self. She was also angry at herself because she had previously reconsidered the divorce in June, but didn't say anything or give me signs because she was afraid I'd revert to my old behavior or reject her. Meanwhile, I had begun to refurbish my father's old villa, which was more of a large house than a full mansion, in preparation for his move this year, and had just given her breadcrumbs or information about it. And she was pleasantly delighted to learn about all of the work I'm putting into it. And I'm still a little bitter that I didn't tell her anything. And all of my ideas were designed without her in mind, as if she were already a distant memory. The option of an amicable divorce has been raised again, but she needed definitive answers. 1. Was there another woman present? Did I really cease loving her? The answer to both questions is no. I told her that while I was sad about losing her during our marriage, I didn't want to be the ex-husband who made empty promises, beat her down, and made a nuisance of herself. It was the least I could do after causing her so much pain. And I also wanted to repay her for her incredible kindness. I merely worked, tried my hardest to be a decent soon-to-be ex-husband, paid my bills, and wanted to pay her rent for the room she assigned me in her home, which she always denied even when I insisted. Eventually, the $1 million question comes up. Do we want this marriage to work? Answer: yes, it will not be easy, and there is still a lot of work to do. We agreed to take baby steps and have already scheduled couples therapy for this week. I already do individual therapy, but she will now seek individual therapy for herself. We spent the last week going on quiet dates, walks, and a brief hike. I also offered a peace offering by asking her if she wanted to help me renovate my father's house and provide feedback and ideas. She was delighted about it. She enjoys gardening, but her property lacks a garden, so she makes do with the potted plants on the balcony. Whereas my father's home has a beautiful garden and a wide plot of overgrown ground behind it. She remarked. We'll have to work hard, but it'll be worthwhile. And I believe that working together on a common project will help us re-establish our bond. So that's where we are now. The path ahead is still long and challenging, but I remain hopeful. I'd want to thank everyone on Reddit for their observations, comments, praise, and criticism. Update. Little has changed in the last week. We had our first couple counseling appointment followed by her first therapy session. We established the structure for our marriage. We went on a few dates and spent quality time together. We still haven't been intimate. She attempted to initiate once, but I gradually transitioned it into snuggling and conversation. Another issue is that I have difficulty sleeping in the same bed as her, not because I dislike her, but because I am so accustomed to sleeping in my own bed that I frequently sleep 1 or 2 hours with her. Then wake up and go to my home office bedroom to sleep. I get up early and prepare breakfast for her. She's thrilled about it, however she mentioned that I didn't sleep with her. Do these things require time? I believe so. But I'm a little scared. I'm conveying the idea that I have given up on our marriage. I feel it will take months and a lot of effort to get back to where we were. She believes the process should be faster, and I am being too harsh on myself and her. Update. I've been sober for nearly a year, beginning after she issued me with divorce papers. She decided to try to reconcile last January, and while it hasn't been easy, we still sleep separately. I don't feel confident enough to have sex with her, despite the fact that we go to individual and couple therapy frequently. We're getting by somehow. Regardless of what she says, I can't get over the embarrassment of being a useless and abusive drinker. And she undoubtedly recalls me as such, making the shame and guilt intolerable. I work as a civil servant in family services, and oddly, I was recently promoted to cabinet in the provincial administration. We even took a snapshot shaking hands with our Prime Minister. My wife chose this shot and shared it on Facebook for everyone to see, writing about how proud she was. I feel she sincerely believes this, which makes me pleased. But I also believe she is overly anxious to throw the past under the rug, and our problems have not been resolved. I still feel a lot of shame and remorse when I look at her, and at one point I even considered divorce. But she insists that I'm doing everything right, and that if I love her, divorce will be something I regret. I just feel like we'll never be able to overcome this. And while there are many pleasant times, I do my best to spend quality time with her, make her favorite recipes, and purchase her gifts. I can't help but feel hopeless and alone in my emotions. She wants us to go on. But for her, it may be easy to forgive me. For me, it's difficult to let go of the humiliation of who I was to her. My therapist says I have to deal with it on my own because I caused all of this, and I agree. But I don't know how to proceed. Is there anything I can do, or should I learn to accept and live with this? Perhaps with time it will improve. After all, a year sober is practically nothing. Update 4. She had every right to petition for divorce due to my alcoholism. She did not deserve that. Meanwhile, I was sick of it, so I quit drinking and concentrated on my profession and refurbishing my father's home. She wanted to reconcile after seeing the changes and I consented. But now I realize I have incorporated the divorce in my life goals. I organized my new life around it. I don't picture myself becoming intimate with her. She tried a few times and I politely declined as a sign of goodwill. I asked her if she wanted to help with my father's home renovations and she enthusiastically agreed. She'd always wanted a garden. Now I regret it because that was intended to be my escape from the world, and I'll have to share it with her. I told her all of this. She was upset, but she also recognized that she was partially to blame. She had never discussed reconciliation with me before and surprised me with it. As a result, what should have been a joyful experience became a cause of tension and concern for me. My therapist and her claim it's my depression talking, but I'm not convinced. Are we really done? Update 5 is not actually an update but rather a fresh development. I showed her the final thread. She's reading it on her phone. She stated that she was already familiar with many of the things I mentioned, especially the comments about German flowers. She stated that if she had known the sorrow or reconciliation that would result, she would not have offered it and now regrets it. She is grateful to everyone for their warm words and admiration. At the same time she became irritated because in her judgment I made things worse than they are, so either I overstated them or I've been hiding my genuine emotions from her. And this is a major concern. For example, she claims that I am not as frigid as I appear to be and that she is not as pushy as I portray her to be. In fact, she's been giving me plenty of space. She says, I'm doing some weird self-sabotage here. She says, I'm trying to get her to leave me but it won't work. And if I truly want to end, I must do it myself. She does not agree with it, but if I want to move out, she will not object. She wasn't angry, just extremely numb. Update 6. Things are not easy, but they are progressing well in both therapy and daily life. There are still some challenges with becoming intimate, but we're getting there. However, shame and guilt can be overwhelming at times. And I'm wondering why she is even staying with me, possibly sunk costs. I give her the greatest little gifts, go on dates, prepare her favorite recipes and help her with chores. But I always feel like I could do more. Sometimes she detects this and tells you to relax. She admits, I try too hard sometimes and it comes across as artificial. She likes it now. I'm always smiling, shaved, well-dressed and gentlemanly with her, yet we joke that I occasionally resemble the president of her native country. But I'm giving it my all, even if it means going above and beyond. Update 7. 2 months later, things are still going nicely. Talks of resuming divorce proceedings have ceased, and we still sleep separately and have no intimacy. Working on my difficulties with my therapist, we're doing well. Sometimes I feel like I can't get over the disgrace of being a useless and abusive alcoholic, and she undoubtedly recalls me as such, making the shame and guilt intolerable. However, it eventually passes. Basically, we're beginning anew with dating and bonding activities. I get her presents and surprises. She admits she expected things to move faster, but ultimately agrees with me that after a year apart, things cannot simply resume as before. She also claims that I am too hard on myself, yet I believe she is the one being overly indulgent. Apart from those issues, we are doing well. I believe this will be my last post for a time. Things are going fine, reasonably so. I'm still experiencing problems in the bedroom, but I'm working on them to be a better spouse, at least in that regard. Last week I was sent to work in our country's capital. It is a 2-month assignment, and I will be given with state housing. She is really thrilled about this and has already begun packing her bags. I have my doubts that she will come along for her own sake. She has friends and family here. Me? Not very much. I've cut them all off and I'm not interested in reconnecting. Her entire support system. She has reasons and loved ones for staying here. Unlike me, she refuses to budge. She has every right to join us because we are married. She also has the ability to operate her e-commerce business remotely because she owns it. Plus, she wants us to return home every weekend. I know better than to die on this hill, so I'll leave with her. That is it. Naturally, I am always cautious and reasonable, optimistic about our future together. Update 8. I'm just stopping by to say that this will be my last post. I couldn't handle it any longer, and I couldn't understand why I kept having bad thoughts about my wife and me even when things were going well. And some of you got in my ear. There could be something wrong with my head. So we contacted a specialist, had tests performed, and discovered that my blood numbers were significantly off. This prompted doctors to hypothesize on a chemical imbalance in my brain and prescribe antidepressants. Not exactly an antidepressant. They explained that they are mood regulators. Both my wife and I were skeptical, but I gave it a shot and lo and behold, my negative ideas vanished overnight. I now feel in charge of my emotions. I feel that I love my wife and that things can and will improve. I used to put up a front, but now I genuinely like spending time with her and making her happy. We resumed making love and no blue pill was required LOL, and we returned from the capital every weekend. We're transforming my father's old property into our own private getaway and love nest. I apologized for my untrustworthy behavior in recent months after she extended me an olive branch. She claimed she doesn't blame because of what we now know, but I don't think that's a good justification. I should have sought medical attention sooner. I can now claim that I made it and that I am happy and grateful. My wife basically gave me a third opportunity, and I don't want to waste it. I want her to smile every day and enjoy everything to the utmost. I suppose this is it, and you will not hear from me ever again. I just wanted to thank you for your feedback, ideas, recommendations, and criticism on the Spara Ad Astra Comments Taiwan Bandit. Congratulations OP. Many have been following your tale and are glad you provided us a pleasant narrative to read. Continue to take care of yourself and your wife. Thank you, pal. I will. I feel like I've been suffering from a protracted hangover, which has only recently subsided. Shining Moon Television. Hello, I recall your previous posts. Way to go, guy. Keep up the great job and cheers to a brighter future for everybody involved. You deserve to grin. Veronica 9216. I followed your story and was among those who suspected there was something wrong with your head. No offense. I mean the chemical imbalance. I am delighted to learn that medication has improved your and your wife's quality of life. I believe she is especially delighted because after all these years, she has finally reconnected with the love of her life. Thank you. I'll admit that I'm worried about becoming addicted to medication for the rest of my life, but doctors told me that it would not be the case. In any case, our well-being is the top priority. Moving on to the next story. Story 2. I discovered my wife in bed with another man while abroad for my profession as an archaeologist. My wife and I met in Savannah where we both went to college in quite different disciplines. She intended to study script writing, whereas I planned to study archaeology. The initial date went well enough that we kept seeing each other, and the more we did, the more we recognized how ideal we were for each other. She was a little geeky, extremely feminine, and a great communicator. When we first started dating, we went out every week for trivia night at our favorite establishment and saw each other. Is there anything we can do during the week before her third year of school begins? She moved in with her mother to save money as living on campus was not the best financial decision. From the first time I met her mother over dinner, she adored me, so did her sister and nieces. They all accepted me as if I had always been a part of the family. I had a job set up as an archaeologist as soon as I graduated. My wife had problems finding work with her degree, so she began producing scripts to send to various streaming sites and channel networks. None of these worked out. Meanwhile, I proposed and we moved into the house I purchased, regardless of her salary. I was certain I wanted to marry her as my wife. She wrote for approximately a year before giving up and working as a receptionist for a charity organization. I told her she didn't have to work a job she didn't like, but she said she wanted to because sitting at home wasn't enough for her. That position lasted 15 months until she quit to start her own home company. She began doing tarot card readings and selling small trinkets made out of epoxy. Every Saturday she went to the market with a cart full of her art projects to display on a table she had prepared to look attractive, inviting and mysterious. I was shocked at how much money she made from doing this. As an archaeologist, I had to travel for work. I'd spend roughly 2 weeks at home before leaving for up to 6 weeks. That was the longest it had ever been, which I didn't think was particularly horrible. Sure, I missed the intimacy with my wife, but it is what makes marriage so special. You wait and remain loyal to your spouse despite everything life throws at you, and reuniting is the most satisfying relationship experience. When I returned after a 6-week trip, it appeared that something was hurting my wife despite the fact that we had amazing reunion sex. She seemed to want to say something to me, but was unsure how I would react. As we watched a movie, she gripped to her phone and I could feel her heart beating. I finally hesitated and challenged her, stating that something was clearly on her mind. She swallowed hard and started crying. She stated that she had met someone in the market who she really enjoyed talking to. She claimed she wanted to investigate being a life coach for said individual, but she wasn't sure how I'd react to her talking to him every day. I asked her if I could read what they had spoken to each other so far, and she handed me her phone after scrolling through the texts. I didn't see much that screamed infidelity. She just asked him how he was dealing with the relocation and reminded him that while having to relocate your family is a major life challenge, it is not the end of the world, and he did not have to feel stuck. We all have the freedom to do whatever we choose, even if it means buying a plane ticket out of the nation and never returning. I told her it was okay for her to coach people and make friends. I only wanted to know the first names of the people she spoke with, and I made it plain that I trusted her not to start an affair or behave inappropriately with anyone. She agreed to my requirements, but I sensed a little disappointment in her. Not enough to say anything, she would have disputed it. We went half a year without any incidents or problems in our relationship. While I was away working in Tennessee, my wife called me one evening as I was lying in my hotel bed. She was crying and said she needed to ask me a question she had been thinking about for a long time. I promised her she could ask whatever she wanted, and that I wouldn't be mad at her for it. She asked if I wanted to sleep with other women whenever I went on a business trip. I told her, no, absolutely not. I never felt compelled to sleep with a lady I didn't love or devote my life to. I would wait as long as necessary to sleep with her because she was everything to me. She was surprised but appeared relieved. She assured me if I ever did want to, I could tell her and she wouldn't be mad. I told her she didn't need to worry about it because it never entered my mind. I told her that when I chose to get married, I made her my one and only for the rest of my life. As much as I would be an archaeologist for the rest of my life, I told her I never wanted anything to come between us and that sleeping with other people was just a formula for disaster that may lead to jealousy, conflicts and divorce. She agreed with me and seemed to feel much better. She told me she loved me with all her heart and wanted to be my good loyal wife for life. With that, we said goodnight. The next morning is when my gut started twisting and knotting. I didn't know what was going on at first. I honestly considered food poisoning as a possibility, but after giving it a moment's thought I realized I wasn't sure I could trust my wife. She never asked me if she could sleep with someone else, but she kind of went around the question by asking me if I wanted to. I decided to go home early, even though my request was denied. I was risking my whole job to drive back home before I was scheduled to leave. After hours of worried driving, I arrived home to find my wife's car in the driveway and no suspicious activity. I was relieved, but that was short-lived. As soon as I unlocked the front door, I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. I raced to it to find my wife having sex with another man. When she saw me standing in the doorway, she screamed. I yelled for App to get out of my house, which she did. After scooping up his clothes, I just stared at my wife in disbelief for a few seconds before reminding her that I had just told her how much I didn't want either of us to sleep with other people and how bad it would be for our relationship. She just whined and asked me what she was supposed to do when most of her life was spent waiting for me to love her instead of actively loving her. I told her she should do what any normal person has to do when they don't have access to a lover, not meet some stranger and decide to take him to her marital home to have sex while her husband was out working. I told her this went against everything marriage stood for and that whatever fantasy she had about an open relationship wasn't going to happen with me. I demanded a wife in all senses of the word. She was on her knees, crying, her eyes out, begging me with cupped hands to forgive her. She blamed herself for talking to other women about her situation and listening to them when they told her to do whatever she felt was right. I was beside myself. I couldn't believe that even though I was totally clear about how I felt about an open relationship, she still went and talked to other women who encouraged her to give in to temptation and betray her vows. She cheated on me. She kept me in the dark and I still caught her sleeping with him. I told her to get out. She told me she didn't know where to go. I told her I didn't care. I knew she had family and friends that wouldn't let her spend a night outside. So I told her to go to one of their houses. She wouldn't move. All she did was sit in the hallway making all kinds of remorseful noises whenever she thought of something specific. She'd start sobbing all over again. I ignored her as best I could, locking myself in the spare room, as annoying as it is. I was forced to stand my ground and share the house with her until she was ordered to vacate by the court. When our divorce was final, while we lived separately under the same roof, I posted daily to social media about what she'd done, tagging all her profiles and business accounts to it. I commented on the pictures of her terrible setup, making smart remarks that questioned her ability to even see her own future downfall. This definitely impacted her reputation. A lot of would-be customers took one look at her social media accounts and found at least one of my comments. It was enough that she lost all motivation to do it. She didn't even try getting a job in her degree field again. My testimony, along with the phone records I requested, were enough to avoid alimony payments. So without any life prospects or motivation, my divorced ex moved back in with her mother, sister and nieces. She's basically back to where she was in high school, except much older and sadder. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this story, please like it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you have a story to share about your or another person's situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.